Hi, I'm Sarah Hansen, and today we're going to be talking about standardized tests. And we'll be highlighting during this video the PSAT and MSQT, the SAT, the pre-ACT, the ACT. So let's go over the alphabet soup, as we call it. Lots of acronyms that are used in the college admissions process. The first one we're going to discuss is called the pre-ACT, which is a practice ACT. In this particular year, it will be given to the 9th and 10th grade students. In future years, we do see that it would be given in the fall for the junior students. As students move toward their junior year, they'll have a chance to take the PSAT and MSQT. This is a practice SAT, but it's also the National Merit Scholarship Qualifying Test. It is given to 11th grade students in the fall for the National Merit Scholarship Qualifying Test. And this is when students, if they have a certain score, which is determined each year, can be recognized as a national merit semifinalist, finalist, or commended. For college admissions purposes, the SAT and the ACT are the two types of tests that colleges may look at for admission. The PSAT and MSQT, they are never looking at those scores during the admissions process. They may look at the recognition if that is given during the PSAT and MSQT, but they will not be actually looking at the raw scores. Colleges do not have a preference anymore between the SAT or the ACT. They treat both of these tests equally, and as we'll go into further detail later on in this presentation, they may not even consider these in the process. The SAT does not have an essay portion anymore, and the ACT does have a writing portion. It is part of the state testing, but it is not used by colleges at all. Students will need to take the writing portion of the ACT when they take the state mandated testing during the school day. Colleges, as we mentioned, don't use it for admissions. During a Saturday administration, if students sign up for a national test date for the ACT, it is their option on whether or not they want to take it. Again, we don't see colleges using it, but if students would like to, they can. So let's talk about the timing of the standardized testing, because it does probably feel like for students that they're taking tests all the time. The 9th and 10th grade students will take the pre-ACT in the spring, as we mentioned. This is a in-school testing date where they'll be testing for that test. Junior year is where we see a little more of the heaviness of the standardized testing. In the fall, juniors will have the ability to do the PSAT and MSQT. In addition, hopefully starting with next year, we are videoing this in the fall of 2024, so hopefully next year in the fall of 2025, we'll also be offering a pre-ACT for our juniors, a practice ACT. All juniors, starting with this junior year, and we're again filming this in the fall of 2024, will take the spring ACT. This is a graduation requirement. It is given during the school day. If students do miss this ACT, they will be required to make it up on a different in-school test day for graduation. Unfortunately, students cannot take an ACT from a Saturday administration and use it to satisfy for the state graduation requirement. Now, students may opt to take more SATs and ACTs, and those will be at cost, though if students are on free and reduced, they are at lunch, they are able to receive fee waivers to take those tests. They are given on Saturdays throughout the school year and a little bit over the summer, though we do tell families that the SAT and ACT, those summer dates, those June, July, and maybe even August, they are a little scarce to find in the area. Schools aren't at full capacity with the proctors to be able to staff them. So we always tell you to think in advance because those registration dates are several weeks in advance of the test, so we don't always kind of think about that. Students do tend to probably take an SAT or an ACT on the Saturday, as they're preparing for four-year colleges. You will need to sign up directly on the school's website. There is a fee involved. The SAT, you will go to collegeboard.com where you'll see your PSAT scores and your SAT scores if you've taken it previously, and ACT is act.org. Typically, our students tend to take it, second semester of their junior year, maybe even in December, depending on the timing of their lives of what's going on. You could take it as a senior, but we do tell you that really, August, September are probably the best dates, because as you start to move into October, if you want to use that score for college admissions, which you probably do, it becomes kind of tight for some of those deadlines that are in November to get that score back. So ideally, you're kind of thinking in advance of how many times do I want to take the test, and when does that work in the timing of our lives, because we all are busy as well with other pieces. Typically, we would say the payout of the test is about 2 to 3 times maximum. We don't believe in over testing. And some students choose to take the ACT because they feel like it might be a better test for them. There are some differences between those two tests. Some students don't want to take it at all, which is totally fine. Historically, we have seen our students, some score better on the SAT and some score better on the ACT, and most of them are probably pretty close in those testing scores between the two of them when you look at the correspondence table that is out online for students to compare their scores. So it really is a family decision if students want to take both. They don't need to, but sometimes that other one might be a better fit test for them. Now we want to address a few myths that we see out there. One of our favorite reps from Yale always talked about how test prep should not be a co-curricular activity. I think that's one of the best lines that I have heard in my 20 plus years, and I really believe that, right? Test prep is woven into our curriculum. I also would tell students day after day, if you are choosing between, keeping your grades up, working on a class like, AP biology or US history, whatever it is, or stopping work on that class to do test prep, please, please, please work on your day-to-day curriculum. Your transcript will always be the most important part in admissions. So we want your strong academics more than test prepping for hours at end on a particular test. Obviously, students need a healthy balance as well between co-curriculars and downtime, and excessive test prepping isn't really helpful to that balance as well. And it can be expensive. Some of these testing agencies are quite expensive, and we caution families about putting all this money out for that. For the SAT, we really do encourage our students to use that Khan Academy connection. Khan Academy has free customized test prep. So it will take your PSAT score and your SAT score and give you free test prep customized to where your deficits were on those tests. They also will show you, if you get a question wrong, what is the right answer and why. And so, even just spending a little bit of time, with Khan Academy, with your test scores that are in there, can really be quite beneficial. With the age of the new electronic version of the SAT and PSAT as well, Khan Academy will have all of that built in to help prepare you, where the testing agencies, I think they've got a little work to kind of develop as we are moving into this electronic age. The next myth that we want to hit is that students should take the ACT or SAT as early and as often as possible. It's not uncommon maybe to see students think that they should take it as a freshman or sophomore. Really, that's what the PSAT is for. We don't feel like students really need to be taking that SAT or ACT as freshmen or sophomore. It's not beneficial. They're still learning the curriculum that is going to be part of the SAT or the ACT. Junior year is really where they should spend that time and focus, and I would even say more second semester of junior year. And then we would tell you, as I had mentioned in a previous slide, that really, after 2 to 3 times, we don't see typically a lot of big jumps in scores, right? At that point, you're just kind of trading points from one or the other. Taking it a second or potentially even a third time, again, really up to students. That third time is a lot of time and energy. Some schools do something as we call super score, right? Where they take the higher sub scores and push them together to give you a new composite. Other schools like University of Illinois will not super score, but they will tell you they will look at the sub scores independently, which sounds a lot like super scoring to me, but similar. But again, we always want to remind you that more value is placed on the transcripts than the test scores. I don't want to spend too much time on this next slide, But I do want to talk a little bit about this concept that test scores can make or break your chances in admissions. And we know in many other countries, testing is the thing that gets you in. It's the thing that tells you which schools you're going to. In the United States, it is really much less of an important factor as versus some of the other pieces. This is recent data taken from colleges last year, which would have been the 23-24 academic year. And you can see what they placed as the top importance as factors in admissions, with grades in college prep courses, so those are the core courses, grades in all courses, and the strength of the rigor of the high school transcript or the high school curriculum. As you go down and look to see where admissions test falls when it's ranked as considerable importance, it is much lower than any of the other places. We see most institutions still kind of remaining test optional. There are some that have moved back to it for sure, but the masses have not. So we just remind you that, in fact, admissions office has once told me, no one from the admissions office is coming out of their door after reading a file and screaming down the hallway all excited and saying, oh my gosh, I have a student with a perfect test score, right? That's not what gets admissions excited, right? They want to see your transcript, they want to see your essays, they want to see these other pieces. The test score, getting 10 points higher or lower, it's not the thing that gets you in, and it's also not the thing that keeps you out. So just be sure to put testing in that bucket that it belongs into, and not put more value in it, which for many of our families is very different thinking. For our families that have come from other countries, their admissions process, everything kind of hinges on a test. And in the United States, in particular where we're at in this age after COVID, testing is such a small part of this. It's just a little tiny piece of that puzzle. So let's actually go into that too. Let's talk about test optional and test blind. So as you kind of move toward your junior year and toward the end of junior year, you want to start looking at admissions requirements and what are they saying about the tests, right? At the time of recording this, the public schools in Florida and Georgia and Tennessee, Georgetown and MIT are the ones that we currently are knowing are requiring the test. Again, this can change daily. And so this is the time of recording, so you always want to go and check your websites of the schools. But there's going to be different language that you see out there. There's test optional, which means you get to choose whether or not to send your score. And it can be really hard for students to decide whether or not to send their score when schools are, telling you this. Some schools are kind enough to report their mid 50% range. So of the students that are on their campus who sent test scores, 50% in the middle had between this score and this score, right? So if your score falls within it or above it, that's probably when you would want to send it. And if it falls in that bottom quartile, that's probably when maybe you want to go test optional, but remember they'll rely a little heavier on your transcript. I also think that a lot of students are scared off by those mid 50%. And what I remind families is that for these schools that have been test optional for several years now, what is happening is that those mid 50% are taking big jumps up because every year that bottom quartile is not sending the test. So you are probably seeing, 20, 30, 40, 50% of the students on that campus potentially have not sent test scores and are probably not in that test bracket. So please don't let those mid 50% scare you away from applying. There are a series of schools that are test blind, and this, again, at the time of recording has ebbed and flowed, but currently Northern Illinois University are one of our closest ones, and all of the University of California public schools, so that would be UCLA, UC Berkeley, UC San Diego, Columbia College Chicago. These are all schools that are test blind, and what we mean by that is they won't take your ACT or SAT scores. They will not allow you to send them. You cannot report them. That is not used in their admissions process. So kind of the opposite end of that scope. Let's talk a little bit about some testing resources that are out there. TestNav is our test prep for the ACT. There's a document that we'll throw in the chat that will get students to be able to download an app and practice on their ACT skills. In addition, Khan Academy, again, we talked about that connection with your SAT and PSAT for free customized test prep. So you just connect your College Board and your Khan Academy account if you haven't already done so. Fairtest.org is a great place as well to kind of see, comprehensively what's going on with the schools on one website. Compass Education Group, they have lots of free resources. We really do enjoy the resources that Compass puts out. They do have some paid services too, which we always caution families about paying, but we do encourage you to definitely check out all their free resources they have there. And then again, at the heart of all of this is going directly to the college's websites. So as you're thinking about colleges, go to their website, see what their current language is about what they're requiring. If it's test optional, usually they give you some guidance on how to make that determination or whether or not to send your test. So always go straight to that source. We do caution students and families about Googling. We're not big fans of some of those other websites that are kind of out there that are more parent driven and information given. We always encourage you to go directly to the source.